So welcome to day 3 of Services Week. This is the third remote case study of the week. If you want to find out other things that are happening during Services Week, you can look at this blog, which is on the TDF main blog. It has some highlights that are happening, and then there's also the open schedule. So the open schedule has all of the remote sessions as well as local sessions happening throughout the country. And everything can be found by going to this bit.ly link, so bit.ly /SW agenda, and it's case sensitive, so capital S, capital W agenda, and everything is on there. Today we are going to hear about the flood warning service, and we are joined by Silvia Grant, who is a research lead at the Environment Agency. So I'm going to stop sharing so that Silvia can take over.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So my name is Silvia, as Cara said, and today really I'm going to try and share our experiences of running the flood warning and information services and what we learned from our challenges and how we've tried to make it more user-centric and resilient going forward. Okay, so I'm going to stop my video so we can focus on the slides with less chance of my Zoom falling through. Okay, I'll just share my video, my screen. Okay. Okay, so as they say, let's start at the beginning. So what is the flood warning and information service? Even though we only have it under one title, it's actually a combination and consolidation of different services. So what we are is really a hybrid multi-channel and multi-platform service, meaning that we don't only operate what you see on Gov.uk, but that's the end product of actually different platforms, different services and channels that we use to do that. So what is it? It's both informational and transactional. So that's also quite unique to a handful of services. It's a service that is livelihood and life-saving. Difficult to prove how much has not flooded because of measures taken after receiving warnings. It's designed to provide information to users in high stress scenarios. That's also something that we have had to design for throughout the years. And it's one of few, if not the only service which provides warnings direct to the general public. I'll go into a bit more detail as to how we do that. And we're also governed by the Civil Contingencies Act 2004. So the Environment Agency has a responsibility to warn the public of flooding. So, and as part of that, there are also category 1 emergency responders. This gives you a very rough idea of what we work with. So on Gov.uk we have maps, graphs, traditional content, emergency tailored content. So that's why it's hybrid. Okay, so this you see on the left is our national view. So it's in effect where the user land. Okay, so with recently, well, it's between 1 in 5 and 1 in 6 homes in England are at risk of flooding, and that number is growing, and partially due to more awareness of climate change, partially due to an increased likelihood of flooding. We are seeing unprecedented levels of interest on the service. So we've had a 4-fold increase of use in 2019 from 2016. And that would be a total of 50 million transactions. So this is just to give you an idea of the numbers again. So this is with regards to the November floodings that we had in and around the Sheffield area. And you can see that only in 30 days, we've issued over 600,000 telephone warnings, 260,000 emails, and also over 250,000 SMS text warnings. In terms of visits to our Gov.uk service, only in the 30 days we've had over 1 million users. So it's quite used, it's getting more used. You'll see the bottom left square has registration to the flood warning system. That's how many accounts have been registered during that time, and how many calls have been received by the flood line, which is our non-digital service. It's what they call a hotline. Okay. So what are the main components of the floods information service? The idea is that we follow our user throughout the life cycle of a flood. So obviously we've got the prepare, the act and the survive. We've also got the response phase, and we try and design around this cycle. So our phase in effect is what we call the national view. This is a picture of our CEO of the Environment Agency demonstrating at a press briefing following the floodings. And that's in effect what it says. It's the view of England and all the warnings and alerts in force. Then another major part of what we do is what we call river levels. And again, quite self-explanatory. It's what the river levels are at that point in time. This is our most shared asset at the moment through social media, and it's also popularized by what we call our super users, which would be community champions and people who people like flood wardens who are really wanting to increase the awareness of their communities around what the river level is doing. So you'll notice that in the big picture, there's a dashed line after the now cursor. That is the pilot that we've been doing around forecasting. That has been a response to user needs. It's something that people were wanting. So we were able to display what our forecasts are measuring through this graph. So it's proved very popular actually. So on average, before the forecast, users would spend on average about 14 minutes on the service, whereas it went up to 72 minutes with the forecast added. So it's really giving users who are interested in this that extra bit of information to help them make the informed judgment. It could be that they're thinking, I won't take this road to go to school, or they might own a boat, or they might decide, in effect, what to do in terms of preparation. So it puts the ball in their court, in effect. Yeah. Okay, next we have localized impact information. Now, this is also in response to what we heard our users wanting. So in effect, what this is the Environment Agency has a very detailed list of how usually on average flooding impacts on the street, so on the very local level, what streets close at what points, what local landmarks are impacted. So we are experimenting presenting this information to the public in a easy to understand and digest way. You'll see the examples on here are when the river reaches this level, these two roads may be closed. And actually we're getting quite good feedback on this too. Again, it's because it puts the user, it empowers the user making their own decision by giving that information that's easy to understand. Now, this is what we call our 5-day flood forecast. Again, it does what it says on the tin. You'll see that for the next 5 days, the risk overall in England, Scotland and England and Wales is very low. So It's really just to give a very quick out view, a bit like the weather warnings. And accompanying this is the flood guidance statement, which is the supporting evidence to this. Okay. So another big component of this multi-platform is the signing up process for the flood warnings. Okay, so this is currently being re-prototyped and iterated upon. At the moment, this is the live version. You sign up with your address, phone number, and email address. We are piloting a contact first validation module, which means that you should be able to register using only your mobile number, and it's giving users more freedom around adding more contacts to their location. So in effect, making it a bit more user friendly. So this is currently being improved on, but it's the main way of users signing up to the flood warnings. Okay, so as a spin-off to that, we also operate what we call a targeted flood warning. And this is for organizations with multiple assets or locations to monitor. So in effect, rather than having 100 accounts on the previous one that you've seen, they'll have one account on this, and through that they can monitor, say they have 100 properties nationwide, say it's a business or academy, they'll be able to monitor these. So it's free for non-for-profit organization like our local authorities and professional partners. Another big part and one of the most valuable parts of what we provide is this multi-agency guidance pages and resources. So this is in effect the main source of the government advice on what to do in a flood situation, either before, during, or after. And this is constructed with, again, professional partners and charities like the National Flood Forum, the British Red Cross. So we're trying to give a consistent message to people through this. A smaller part of what we operate is what we call a long-term flood risk information. So this is mostly for property buyers or people who want to renew their house insurance, and they want to know in the long term where their property sits in flood zones, in effect. It has about 1 million transactions a year, and it's quite useful. It sits on the side of the more immediate warnings that we offer. Okay, and the flood line I've mentioned before is basically where our users would go if they can't sign up through gov.uk, or if they don't have a phone, or if basically they can't go through the digital route. So the flood line will either just respond to the query or sign up on their behalf or help them sign up. So it works as our assisted digital and our non-digital route as well. It's unlike some other, what you would say, hotlines, it's very well run, it's scalable, there are virtually no waiting times, and it generally enjoys quite high customer ratings. Okay, so you'll probably imagine that behind this is quite a significant amount of data and data sets that we use. All of this is open. We share this with third parties, and it has almost infinite, well, not infinite, but it has a very large number of users that people can tailor this information for. One of the most powerful partnerships that the service has been able to forge recently has been through Google Public Alerts. And the Environment Agency was the first authority in England to partner with Google Public Alerts, which was a great step forward for emergency alerting here in the UK. And it's basically a way of of reaching our users directly if there is a warning. So it's a partnership that took some time to create, but up until now there's been a few flood incidents, and those have been picked up by Google Public Alerts, and it's been overall quite a successful step. Okay, so being the user researcher, I'm quite interested in telling you what sort of user research we do, because it's quite peculiar to flooding, I would say. We have a very big focus on communities. So I'll just run through our main activities. So we're quite fortunate in the sense that we can show up to Environment Agency engagement opportunities. We can do some pop-up testing there. And because, again, the Environment Agency enjoys quite a good reputation compared to other government agencies, people are always willing, quite happy to talk to us. And because of that, we can have formal and informal community workshops. And I would say that is where we get most benefit from our user research, from having all the people in the room telling us what is good, what is bad, not just about the digital service that we run, but in general. It's good for us to know how flooding has impacted their lives and what they do, what they can't do, because that helps us make a holistic service. Okay, so then we have the more formal user research activities like usability testing in labs, and that helps us refine prototypes and the more fine-tuning of what we're looking to propose on our GovUK pages. Participation in local engagement events. So as I mentioned, we can assist and participate in Environment Agency events in the local areas, and we have one of the advantages of that is that the local areas of the EA have already forged a strong relationship with those communities, and we can go along and show what we're working on, receive a little bit of feedback. So that means we're never short of user feedback. We also have some technology simulations. So this is one of the most recent ones, and it focuses on cell broadcast technology. I'm going to go into that a little bit later, but it's not the most traditional set of user research, but it's basically alerted us to the fact that we can explore new technologies, and there are ways that we can make very, very good, useful research outputs from it. We also attend specialist conferences. I think the most notable ones for flooding, because flooding can be quite a niche topic. We have, obviously, I've talked about our external users. We have a lot of professional users as well. And these conferences are good to get in touch with them. These photos are from the Flood Expo and I think Flooding Coast. We tend to get our servers and business owners get speaking slots in them. We can speak to people who are then interested in knowing more. And that is also a form of user research for us. Then this is probably one of our favorites. The team has designed a live user dashboard. So you'll see from it that it's kind of a bird's eye view of what's happening on the different parts of the services. On the right column, we've got the rolling feedback from a smart survey from the actual pages that we run, conversion rates, referral traffic, how many users are on the different parts of the service, social media. So this is really, it's invaluable to what we do. You'll see in the red box, there's a highlight on how much Facebook traffic that's been referred. I'm going to touch upon that later, but these things alert us to the fact that actually now people are finding us a lot more through Facebook. Why is that? And then we can investigate and increase our social presence there. We've got surveys of all shapes and sizes. This is an example of a public survey that we have circulated autumn winter last year, and this one again is around cell broadcast. It had a very good turnouts. We had over 1,600 people respond, and it's giving us invaluable feedback as to what the general population wants and expects of a flood warning service, but also of related aspects around that, such as emergency alerting. This is the TV in our room, and it's again got the rolling feedback survey. Sometimes some of the responses can be quite witty from the users, which is great, and it is many times we can address it immediately. Other times it's things for us to take on board. Social media. So we're trying to do a bit more on social media. I know that it's a tricky territory doing research on Facebook and on Twitter, but there is a degree that we can learn even without the interaction with the users. And because flooding is quite obviously a public incident, people tend to talk about it a lot, and there's a lot that we can learn from even just observing the open public communication around that. And obviously there are more engaged users who come and talk to us directly, which is great also. So that's how we reach our users. Who are they then? So I'm just going to talk through the external users. We obviously have internal users of our systems as well, but I'm going to focus on the end user, so the general public. So it usually splits up into two camps in terms of digesting the information that we present on the Flood Information Service pages on gov.uk. We tend to see that they either hate the graphs and the details and the numbers, or they love it. It doesn't seem to be really quite a continuum. And that is a challenge for us because we need to design journeys that cover for the two user groups. So we don't want to absolutely only super simplify it for the people who hate the detail, but we can't overcomplicate it for the people who are looking for that information. So the way that the team has designed around that is by having a two-step journey. So the immediate journey will have only the important high-level information that you need to know, like in your area that you've looked for, there is no flood risk. Fine, you can see the map if you want to. And if you want to continue on that journey, you're quite interested, you are what we call an engaged user, then you can cascade and go and look at things like the river levels, you can look at the maps, you can look at the target area shadings, you can look at the 5-day forecast. So in effect, it's trying to provide, it's been difficult, but again, the user testing has helped devise a good solution around that. Okay, in terms of user groups, you'll probably imagine we've got reactive citizens who come to the service via triggers, whether it's BBC, the Met Office, or a weather alert, or something they've read on the news or the radio, or actually through organic searches, so people looking up for flood risk Manchester, for instance. Then we've got proactive citizens driven to us by the need to take control ahead of an event. So it might be that they're thinking, oh, it's raining a lot, I wonder whether my river will flood. Then we've got highly engaged users or super users who consume this granular data habitually. So usually they will have bookmarked the river level page for their main river and tributaries, and they will keep an eye on it. They will keep an eye on the forecast. They will make contact with us. They will put other measures in place, in effect, to monitor that flood risk, whether that's checking our rainfall gauges or many other fascinating things actually that some of these users do. And then as a spin-off to that, we've got professional users like consultants and recreational users, like people who own boats or go kayaking or use it as a hobby. Okay, so over time we've refined a few personas. These are only a few of them, not all of them. I think they're probably the most interesting ones. So Molly and Roger refined, and this is actually a real picture of them. I think they are probably the archetype of our vulnerable elderly user citizen. They're both registered blind. Molly is Roger's carer. They have been flooded in Boston in 2013, and they received no assistance by the local authority. But they're very active citizens in that community. Roger chairs the Boston Disability Forum, and so having these disabilities, they use different tools to help. They use Zoom text and JAWS. Roger can read Braille, and again, quite a big challenge designing for the elderly who are disabled, but then again, those are the ones that will need our help the most. Okay, so completely other end of the scale, we've got Polly, who is a tourist, blogger, climate change activist and champion. And again, she's always on the go, so needs to know whether there will be flood risk in the new places that she will be visiting. Digital inclusion scale quite high. But then again, recognizing they'll want to consume a lot of digital information. Alan, also quite a typical one for floods, non-online, so never used a computer, quite happy not using a computer, but is a flood warden, so very interested in keeping his community safe. Made adjustments to his house that he's standing in front of, like adding the step you'll see at the bottom, and we find that there are groups quite adamant of saying no, I definitely don't want to use the digital service, but there are things that we can still do to provide value to people like Alan. Again, another interesting one is what we have called Max, and it's the user who is aware of the flood risk, but takes little action to minimize the damage to his property or to his household. So his main goal is, once the flooding has come and gone, is to recover quickly. So it's not as simple as many of our user journey maps are, because we have, as you see, quite sophisticated user groups. Not everybody will react the same way to a warning. Some people will do everything you tell them, other people will want to validate, other people will be skeptical. So that is something we've taken forward. Okay, so the next section is going to focus on the GDS service design principles, end-to-end, front to back, and in every channel. So I'm just going to go through them quickly, and just to highlight how we try and tailor the flood service to this. So how is flood end-to-end? So we start with the crux. The question of the user is, am I going to get wet? That means that we need to have a whole, again, cycle around that. We have different ways of communicating that. This is part of the Prepare, Act, Survive campaign by the Environment Agency. And it basically means that we try and get them from the very beginning of their journey, in this case an organic search, straight into the local page of interest, so not the national view, and give them, in this case, immediate reassurance that they're not going to flood. Or if they do, like in this case, providing tailored impact information. So this information, this paragraph that you see here, is actually not easy to produce, because you'll see it says things like from Monday onwards, the weather will be fairly dry. The rainfall can cause a small amount of groundwater at this specific level. So it's very specific. It's time specific. It's location specific, and this information has to come out in a very short amount of time by the duty officers who produce this information. So there's actually a very, very tight, very strict process around how this information is produced for us to then have it up on gov.uk as quickly as physically possible. The right display, again, is a display from our beta work. So our entire service is being refreshed. We've gone through a very successful alpha stage. We are now in the private beta stage. So what you can see in it is the different impacts to that specific level. So if you're interested in this river, you live next to it, you can then measure, okay, at this point, say 6.2 meters, the B4231 will close. So you can, again, make your own informed decision. And again, this hasn't been the easiest information to put out. The other part of the cycle is to have EA response during the flood events. So obviously that's what we do online, and this is what happens on the ground. And then post events, we'll have assurance, we'll have help. So the flood line will be able to assist telephone queries, and we've also got content to support that, how to recover after a flood, what happens next. And throughout this entire end-to-end journey, what we're trying to do is to treat users and communities as an integral part of the emergency response. So they're not just a thing that we don't consider them as part of the background in effect, but we actually try and involve them actively as part of this response cycle. So this is the recover section. Okay, so as I was mentioning, there are different ways that the users can come into our service. So what we do to support them is we work in unison with the category 1 response structures in the Environment Agency in response. We collaborate real time with our professional partners on the ground, again, to get as much information and warning as early as possible. We ensure we design and build a service which can be used in emergency scenarios, like you're out and it's raining, you don't know if you can take that road, or if you might flood in the next 6 hours, you're on a mobile, or you're not on a mobile, you don't even know that we exist and you want to go through a different route. Also, what we're trying to do is move from a generic warnings to very specific tailored messages to, locally relevant, and by warning strategically and when necessary. So we are aware of things like alert fatigue. So we're trying to tailor again and streamline that warning process. Okay, so front to back, how does that work? So there's quite a bit of hard work that goes into making things simple, as to say. So what the team has done is redesign the service to provide an even more user-centered experience of an otherwise quite sophisticated system. So the way it works for them, they receive this flood alert via a text, email, or automated call. This message was generated by the EA, flood warden duty officers. This is a picture of an incident room, which is what opens when there are multiple alerts and or warnings forecasted. And it's issued via a complex bespoke warning system. And after that, and to inform that system, we have duty officers monitor levels and alarms from hydrometry, telemetry, and or forecast systems. So these are different ways that we can get alarms that then go to people like in the incident room that we've seen before. And to do that, we use across the country information to trigger the operational response, and they do things like inspecting the fences, closing floodgates, and removing blockages. So there is a very, very physical aspect to all of this. And this content is usually cross-verified by our area officers. So in effect, we are going from us user receiving a text from quite a complex structure to achieving that. And we are working, again, another piece of work that the team is working on is how to make this even faster. So how to make the warning on GovUK display even faster than it currently is. The last section focuses on how we are trying to be multi-channel. So at the moment, we receive texts, we send texts for both alerts and warnings if applicable. Emails tend to have a bit more information in them, like the local impacts information. They don't use this road, this car park will close. Automated calls and interactive voice response. So the team has recently moved from a quite robotic sounding voice to Amazon Polly, which has a bit of a more friendly voice, and then there's the IVR as well, which is an automated route. We are trying to be more visible in social media. Obviously, it's quite a big channel, big market to penetrate, but I think we are making progress. There's Google Public Alerts, which I've mentioned already, which is a new channel for us, and it might be a new channel for fellow services as well going forwards. We do warning on the ground, obviously, as well. So in very extreme cases, there will be door knocking, there will be sirens, there will be signs. And coming soon, this is cell broadcast. Now, if you have travelled abroad, you might have received the cell broadcast through your phone. Handsets are generally configured to receive these emergency alerts. It's not a technology that exists yet in England, but it's something that the Environment Agency is taking a lead on trialling and exploring. So what you'll see is on the left is a screenshot of receiving a cell broadcast. It looks similar to a text, but in reality, it works for a completely different process. It comes through directly through the cells in phone mast. It's geo-targeted, and your phone, when it picks up the broadcast, reacts very differently as if it were a text. It will make a very loud, distinctive tone sound. It will vibrate, flash, do other things to attract your attention. It's a one-way system, so it's something that we are looking into going forwards, trialing. We're trying to influence some of the policy decision makers in the Cabinet Office around this, and it's quite an exciting space. If you are interested in it, drop me a line, because it's very much work in progress. Another coming soon for us is encouraging more community generated content. So in effect, that would be if there is a flood, even though you might not have flooded personally, but the road has, it would really, really help the EA officers to know that. So we're trying to encourage more crowdsourcing, in effect, and looking ways into that. Okay, so very last few slides. How are we developing? We're trying to include local impact info, as I've mentioned. Rainfall display is another big one. Again, the response to user feedback, and it's people want to know, in effect, how much it has rained to see the gauges. The team is doing lots of accessibility innovation and map components across government. You might have seen some of our work, and faster display of the warnings on WK, as I have mentioned. We are also in the process of reviewing the message contents to make it a bit less generic and a bit more tailored in effect. And we are reviewing the signing up and onboarding process. As part of that, I mentioned we are re-prototyping that. We are also doing an overhaul of legacy systems used by our internal users. We do actually talk to them as well, and we're doing quite a big campaign at the moment with internal users. So we are now looking to introduce user-tested user interfaces for them. I've mentioned the forecast. You'll see the dashed line again, and that's quite a big step forward for us. And we are experimenting with more targeted engagement on social media. This is part of the latest flood action campaign. So as a conclusion, I would probably say the three main successes or experiences that we've been working on is consolidating across different parts of the service, engaging communities, and harnessing new technologies. So that's the end of my presentation. I've left just about enough time for questions. You can find us on Twitter, or otherwise we tend to blog either on DEFRA Digital or on Medium. So do follow us. Okay.
Thank you so much, Silvia. That was it was so amazing to see that all in so much detail. So interesting. If anyone has questions, you can type them in the chat. I'll start. We do have just a few minutes for questions. I'm just wondering if you can tell us, like, what does the team look like? How big is it? It's just so much work that you talked through.
Sorry, how big is like the usage? Oh, the team. Oh yes, I should have mentioned, I had a photo of the team. I thought the presentation was too long, so I cut it. But we have two Scrum Agile teams, in effect. So one team focuses on the immediate risk, so immediate data, and the other team looks at the more static flood data. So it's your traditional agile multidisciplinary team.
Great. There's a question from Lisa in the chat. Could you explain a bit more how you interact with local authorities? There's a few questions in there. So that's the first bit. Okay. How do you interact with local authorities?
Yeah. So we have different levels of engagement with local authorities. So from a digital perspective, we engage with them if we want to know from our digital counterparts how, actually I'll give you an example. We have been talking to local authorities around what they do with surface water, because surface water, as in rainwater, is responsibility of the local authorities and not of the Environment Agency. We have to work in partnership with them a lot, and we are now working with them to know, would they be in the place in the foreseeable future to issue some sort of alert based on rainfall, so for tempests and that sort of thing. So we are linking up in that way. It tends to be very, very specific from us. However, the Environment Agency core structure is in constant partnership with local authorities. But from us, from a digital team perspective, we tend to see around, it's mostly about service enhancement. The static team works with them a lot more because they tend to be a central user of things like flood risk maps. So we update flood risk maps quarterly, and we give them to local authorities, and then they can use them to approve things like flood risk plans and planning permissions. I don't know if that answers your question. It's multifaceted. So we interact on a digital personal level, but then there's a more structured process from the Environment Agency who deals with that. Okay, so how stress levels of users inform design? That is a very good question. It's not easy to put yourself in the user's shoes, and it's not easy to do user research during a flood where you actually have the real stress of the person. The best that in terms of user research that can be done is to participate in the incident rooms with the Environment Agency and see how the incident response unravels. But it very much relies on people retelling their experience around what happened during the flood. And it tends to be things like, I woke up and I went downstairs and I was all flooded. I didn't know what happened or what I was supposed to do. But how it informs the design, it's basically what I mentioned about it has to be, the information has to be immediately visible to those users. So it has to be, they have to land on the local page. We don't want them to look at the England map and then look for their alerts. We want them to go straight to their most local alert level and tell them what to do, whether to panic or not. How is this reusable for other extreme weather events? This is a very, very good question, because we are now launching a new part of the system that we call the next warning system. So it's almost a next generation flood warning system. And as part of that, we are talking to other parts in government, so other departments. And we want to know, as we are enhancing and expanding the flood warning service, could that warning engine be used for other emergencies? So we're running a discovery around that. And you mentioned air pollution, and we are talking to some air quality colleagues. We have had some discussions across public health, incident response, things like IT alerts. So in effect, and this is quite a good platform for me to make that call, but if you work in a service that you think might benefit from sending warning messages either to the public or to internal users, get in touch, because we're trying to get in touch with you the other way around. Does that answer your questions? Take that as a yes, hopefully. Cool.
That's great. Thank you so much, Silvia. If there's no more questions, I think we'll wrap up. Thank you so much for sharing this work and for answering these questions. It was so interesting. And yeah, hope everyone enjoys the rest of Services Week.
Thank you very much for having me, Cara, and thank you everybody for joining.
Cool. All right. Have a good day.
And you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.